you start to pull out the scarce bits. You start to make other things scarce in your life. And what that does is it produces potency. To realize that there's 1, 2, maybe 3, maybe 5 things that you can be the best in your world at, and 5 would be a ton, right?
Right. Yeah.
1's enough. And then let go of everything else. It's actually scary to let go of things that you're kind of good at. It can be scary to let go of things that you're not good at but making money at.
Sure.
Right? But if you can figure this notion out of what is my value creation mechanism, what is something that I have in abundance, and then begin to lack everything else, you get to this potency idea. And if you can show up potently in the world, I think that's the best way of describing what it means to show up as the best version of yourself for the benefit of others.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Hard But Worth It podcast. We're really glad you're joining us today. In our last episode, we talked a lot about the question about what's your why. And we played with the 4 different components of that, being personality, your humanity, the home, whatever home means to you, but then this idea of your distinctive story. And I ended by talking about this thing called, we call it ICON, the value creation mechanism. That it's great to be able to answer the what's your why question because it activates momentum and motion into the world to go create value. And we often say that we exist, ICON's why is to help people show up as the best version of themselves for the benefit of others. And that's a value proposition, so to speak. So I thought it'd be fun to start this one out, Mitch, by asking you, what's your why?
Wow. Getting a little personal there.
Well, as personal as you want to be in front of a bunch of cameras.
Well,
but
the easy answer.
Remember is there's only dozens of people watching.
Yeah, there's only dozens. That's right. The easy answer is world domination. Right? That's my why.
It is the only acceptable outcome.
That's right. No, well, I think fortunately working with you and having a process to do this work well. Has honed me in at least at this time of my life to say my why is around the idea of building people. Mm-hmm. And with that comes the why of inspiring, encouraging, envisioning people so that I can help build people to build things, right? Build great things.
Oh, okay,
So
cool.
It's this idea of building people that build great things.
Yeah.
I think right now that's where my why feels like.
And I like that language of talking about, I think right now, right, that idea, because we actually talked about this last time and it's worth reiterating that these answers to this question are functional, that cause motion and action. We go do things with them in the world, but they're not permanent. There's not this sense of, we've answered the question and now we know we're always doing the right thing for the rest of our life. Like it's done. It's not that. It's like, I think, right. I like that, the way you said that. Okay. So we also talk about this notion of value. We want to take this thing, when we talk about why it's a motivating or an animating thing. Often think of it as an orienting principle that helps us navigate decisions, helps us identify our yeses and our nos. But today we're going to talk about it a little further in terms of it's a way that you create value. You can use this to understand how you create value in the lives of others around you, a value creation mechanism. And if you were to kind of click it forward into kind of an actionable statement, do you have language that would help us understand how you do this thing in a way that creates value that benefits others?
Yeah, I do. I think currently in my business, it shows up in how I lead my company. Mm-hmm. I think there are types of leadership models, and maybe 2 real obvious ones are, there's the type of leader who builds people to be dependent on them. Mm-hmm. And it's a style and it works. Mm-hmm. And those types of leaders tend to foster an environment where people are more dependent on their presence. They're assisting and they can function really well, but their senior level presence is so big, it creates a dependency on them. And we know then when that leader leaves, sometimes that creates a little confusion because those people weren't really developed to lead. My style shows up differently in that I think I build leaders around me. And so in my business, I'm always looking for ways to envision and empower people to the potential in them to run with something. So rather than it being, on my shoulders to do it all.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm probably a little more decentralized, a little more trusting and empowering. I know that's a weird word, but, giving the ball to people. And sometimes I've actually been criticized for being maybe a little detached or feeling aloof by some people that I've led,
Right.
because I'm not a micromanager.
Right.
I'm a builder and empower and
Let 'em
entrustor.
go,
With
let 'em
that
go.
comes
Yeah.
a level of, hey, if I trust you, it means I'm checking in on you less.
Right.
But for others, it sends a signal of, hey, you don't care about me. So I've even had to learn in that process of how to work that through. But I think it just shows up in my style of leadership.
Right. So you have a style of leadership that is, we're using words like decentralized. You create space for others. You're not overbearing is the negative side of it, but
Sure.
you're not, I hear you saying you're not as deeply involved, not providing as much support and reassurance maybe.
Yeah.
Can you see ways in your history of leadership where that hasn't been beneficial? You alluded to that a little bit, but like you're not the right tool for every job, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say not every person is the right fit for my style of leadership.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right? Because the way I see it is, I'm leading my world. At the end of the day, I'm leading in my world. I'm owning that part, and so I recognize that the people who are going to run with me they're gonna appreciate or connect or align with a certain style of leadership. And so as I've discovered this, I can have those talks sooner with people so that we avoid problems, and they can move on to maybe a leadership environment where they might thrive better if they need a little more structure or a little more managing type of leader, because there's nothing wrong with that, but that isn't going to be the style you get. I think I'm more of like a composer. And I could see this playing out in my life in my young leadership, even though I didn't have language for it.
Right.
I was always about the more people on my team running in parts of leadership, the better the production, the better the presentation, the better the thing we build. Like, I can build this, but we could build this.
Yeah.
And so I think today that's just, I have better language for it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're describing this way that you show up that creates value in many circumstances, some circumstances, but not in all circumstances, or for all people in this case, right? You have a value creation mechanism. And when you deploy it in a particular way, it creates extraordinary results. And if we turn it around and deploy it in another spot where they need people who need more structure is a good word for this. It's not just micromanagement, it's tighter structures so they can thrive. You're not the right guy for the job, right? This notion of value, how you create value, understanding it in ourselves, being able to say, this is my why, and this is the mechanism through which I create value in the world, allows us to grab a hold of it and own it. And if you can own it, you can master it. And that's the key that we're looking for here.
Right.
When we talk about this idea of a value creation mechanism, it's the ability to recognize that there's a way that I do things. It's neither good nor bad. It's got to be conditioned correctly. It has to be in the right place at the right time and the right amount. And we want to become. It's like the difference between a tradesman and a craftsman, right? Well, that's probably an unfair distinction for people who identify as tradesmen. I'm not trying to throw tradesmen under the bus.
Right.
I'm trying to get to this word craft, right? When you're around somebody who is a true craftsman, like they've mastered something. I grew up in a lumber environment where woodworkers seemed to be everywhere. And when they would walk into their shops, the way they held their tools, the way they touched wood, the way they would massage it and move it, and it was almost this. I don't know the right word for it, but
like an experience.
Yeah. It was almost like some of them it was almost sensual at times. They loved wood, and they could see the grain and the knot and the curl and how it would move and connect to each other. And it's just incredible what they could see in wood. They were craftsmen, right? And I think there's a way that we want to capture language around ourself and how we create value that can do the same thing.
Well, so then how do we do that? Because like part of our journey is discovering that along the way. And as we learn, we can become more focused at maybe, becoming a craftsman to the thing we could be great at, and not focusing on these other things that maybe we could be good at.
Right.
So we're trying to, how do we become really focused on the area we bring the greatest contribution, the greatest value?
Well, you just use the language good to great, right? Which
Yeah,
is
totally.
Jim Collins, right?
Yep.
It's just sitting right there. And one of the fun things about Jim Collins' work and in that book, which everybody should read, it's phenomenal. But he makes this point that to go from good to great, you have to figure out what you can be the best in the world at. Where's your unfair competitive advantage, right? That kind of an idea. I think as persons, we need to do that as well. Now, I don't like the notion of the best in the world, but what about the best in your world? What is it that you can be the best in your world at? And it is a bit of an unfair competitive advantage. It's just easier for you, right? We want to get our mind wrapped around that, and to do that, it's often we'll push two ideas together that some people want to pull apart, and the words are abundance and scarcity. There's a whole crowd of people that grew up in this thing. They'll call it the scarcity mindset, and they want to live with an abundance mindset where everything's possible, where there's plenty to go around, and they don't have to live in this fear that they're going to lose out, and or they'll call it a poverty mindset, and they want to shift into this wealth orientation. And I'm like, that's great. If you're living in a scarcity mindset, you're missing half of the equation. Right? But if you move from scarcity to abundance, well, now you're living in the other half of the equation.
Right.
And the problem with half of the equation, the problem with a profound half truth is the other half.
Yeah.
And we need them both. So when you push those two ideas together, that you can value scarcity and also abundance, what I think in the personal journey we're talking about is this notion that there is something that I have in abundance. There is something that is more natural. It's like almost built into me that I can deliver if I do the work to master it. But that means everything else might be scarce in my life. And that in this context, that's subtractive.
Yeah.
And you want to start subtracting those things from yourself. It's like negative and positive space in artwork, right? Negative space is very important because it highlights the subject. But what's the subject?
Yeah.
And that's you.
Yeah.
Right? So you start to pull out the scarce bits. You start to make other things scarce in your life. And what that does is it produces potency. To realize that there's 1, 2, maybe 3, maybe 5 things that you can be the best in your world at, and 5 would be a ton, right?
Right. Yeah.
1's enough. And then let go of everything else. It's actually scary to let go of things that you're kind of good at. It can be scary to let go of things that you're not good at but making money at.
Sure.
Right? But if you can figure this notion out of what is my value creation mechanism, what is something that I have in abundance, and then begin to lack everything else, you get to this potency idea. And if you can show up potently in the world, I think that's the best way of describing what it means to show up as the best version of yourself for the benefit of others.
Yeah. Yeah. And in other language, it's this idea of extraordinary productivity is not in doing more, it's actually in doing less. It's the power of focus, right? So you're getting at a concept that we know that says the more I let go of things I might be good or average at, I can allow the thing I might be uniquely qualified or my unique ability to emerge, and then I can nurture that in a way where I master it and I become really, really specialized or good at that one thing.
And to do that, you have to be able to sort of own it, see it. And I was working with someone actually just today on this question, and he's being kind of sheepish about it. Well, I don't know what I'm the best at, and I don't, because, and I said, it kind of feels like writing the cover letter on a resume, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it feels like.
Let me tell you how awesome I am.
Exactly. But here's the thing. What we're not saying is that you're awesome at delivering it yet.
Right.
But we want you to be awesome at delivering it. We really need you. There's something you are amazing at that I'm not. I'm just not. But it turns out we need what you have in the world. And that's why this matters. So if you can learn what that is, here's another notion on the scarcity abundance thing that's important. It's scarcity that creates value. Abundance is inflationary. So the thing that I have in abundance, I have a hard time valuing because I've always had plenty of it. I've never been without it. It's so common and obvious that I kind of think everybody must have plenty of it. Therefore, it can't possibly be valuable. But when I see what somebody else has in abundance that I don't have, I'll value that.
Right.
And then I might even go after it. And it's like, no, that's their thing. So to be able to see what I have devalued in my life, and that's actually what this guy did. He started using diminishing language to describe something that I already know about him. That's beautiful. It's amazing. He's like, well, I'm just a the. I'm like, actually, that's the thing.
Yeah. Let's find another way of looking at that. That's
Right.
awesome.
Right.
Right.
Because it's when we can see it, when we can value it, when we can wrap our hands around it, we can start to become craftsmen of it.
Yeah.
And that's where we get good at delivering it.
Yeah. And I think too, like if we could find a group of people who know us and that we really trust. So there's some qualifiers there. And sit down with them and just ask them if you're looking for a way to try to identify your unique ability or the thing that's, you're best at. Maybe ask some people to go, how is it that you see me contributing? Why do you want me on your team? When I show up as the best version of myself, in your opinion, what is it the thing that I bring? What do I bring to the table? Because chances are that'll start to clue you in, because how other people experience you is probably, on your best day, that's probably the thing you're really good at. And you maybe start to want to hone in on that. And I think we'd be surprised if we listened to people talking the way they talk about us behind our backs on the positive side.
Right.
We're always afraid to hear the negative, but there are people having conversations about you after having a coaching session or whatever, and they're actually talking about how awesome you are. What are they saying? That might clue you in a little bit. Oh, okay, I should park here a bit and do some work on that.
I think you're absolutely right. There's a do you hear that?
I do hear that.
I don't know if you guys heard that on the video, but that was the thunder just clapped at
That's
the end
right.
of that, man. Boom. Talk about a mic drop. There's a tool we actually use in our coaching called, and it's old. It's from the 50s. It's been around a long time. A lot of people use it, but it was amazing how many people don't know about this. It's just called Johari's window. Go Google Johari's window, and you'll find an exercise there that is really, really impactful on this. Because what other people know about you that you don't know about yourself is some of the most profound self-awareness that you can capture.
Right.
And it's nearly, I'll go further. It is not possible to actually become self-aware without community, because there's just stuff about you can't see about you, but it's obvious to us. And I end by telling a story of when I was the person I consider my first client as a coach. Never paid me, never signed up, never did anything, but he taught me something about being a coach that I then leveraged. We used to play music together, and then we'd have lunch pretty regularly. And we're having lunch, and he says to me one day, "Kirk, you have no idea how valuable these conversations are." And I was like, "You're right. I have no idea how valuable they are." And then I did something really bad, really mean. And he said, "The way you see the world, the way you talk, the way you think, it blows my mind." And I made the mistake of thinking, well, then you must be an idiot. Right?
But you didn't say that.
I did not say that, but I literally thought that. You must be dumb as a box of rocks, because I needed to diminish myself. And the only way I could do that and make his statement still his statement without taking it away from him was make him smaller than how small I held myself.
Right.
So if you think I'm interesting, you must be an idiot.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a self-protective mechanism, right? Yeah. That's an inability to see that there's something I'm doing that he sees as valuable, that he doesn't have in his life, that I do in mine. And that's just me not understanding. So over time, though, what I kind of heard that, and I started paying attention to our conversations. I started listening to what was going on. I started to step outside myself and watch. What am I doing that's so interesting? Why does he find this?
Yeah, I'm just being me.
Doesn't everybody think like this? This is normal. I'm not special. Well, what we like to say is you're unique just like everybody else, right? So there's a specialness to me, but you have one too. It's not that I'm better than you. That's not the point. I'm better at something than you. Fair enough. So I began to pay attention to it. I began to notice what it was. Then I began to do it in other relationships on purpose. Then I began to realize I've always been doing this. And when I started to do it with intent, I got better at it. And as I got better at it, I started to realize it's a deliverable. And that's the birthplace of Icon Coaching.
Yeah.
This framework we talk about is built on that really ugly moment of me going, wait a minute, that's not right. I know this guy's not dumb.
Maybe he's a genius. So what does that say about you?
Careful.
That's right.
This ego. My hat size is already hard to find hats for. Right. But it really did point this idea out. It was my first experience of realizing that we get to be great at something. Mm-hmm. We are great at something. And over time, I see it more and more as the greatest joy of our lives can be the delivering of this thing to the world for the benefit of others. And that people will come from all over the place to experience it if we can become craftsmen of it and able to deliver this thing that we call a value creation mechanism. And if you take this all the way back into this framework of notion of what are you all about, our third question, who are you? What are you all about? How do you tick? Why do you exist? What's your why? Those are all a word cloud of this question. We take this all the way back to the notion of you are the product, you are the deliverable. That increasingly in the modern economy, you showing up is the engine of innovation or the means of production that gets value created. I would suggest that understanding your value creation mechanism is your unfair competitive advantage in the marketplace. And the better you get at figuring out what that is, seeing it, owning it, and then becoming a master of it, the more meaning and purpose you'll find in work.
Yeah.